We have enjoyed bringing you podcasts week in and week out for the last almost 100 shows. We're coming up to our 100th show. Can you believe that already? And if you've enjoyed listening, please help us keep the lights on here by subscribing to the show and giving us a rating. We'd love 5 stars, but we won't tell you what to do on your favorite podcast platform. Does size matter? Pot Daddy John Morgan, the goat of medical marijuana in Florida, thinks it does, according to the billboards and the bus wraps. We've got today's special guest, none other than John Morgan. We'll talk about medical marijuana, we'll talk about politics, the 2024 elections, some legislative races he's interested in, and much more. So, Pot Daddy John Morgan, stick with us. You don't want to miss it.
I mean, people don't have any trouble with guns in a house. And they say the reason we don't is because we lock it up. Well, lock it the fuck up.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
Can I let people know that we're doing this from bed, or is that our little secret?
Yeah, no, we can let people know.
Okay. Hey, all right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I'm not in the terracotta room. I'm joined today by special guest, Pot Daddy John Morgan. And we're doing this from bed, aren't we, John?
Sort of. I was in bed, and I had to get out of bed, take a shower, and now I'm sort of in bed.
Okay, so half in bed and half out of bed. How are you doing today?
One leg in, one leg out.
I'm not even gonna. There's so much there, but I'm gonna leave that. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me. I was talking to one of my pot peeps yesterday, and they were like, "Oh, this is such a good get for you." So thank you for joining us on Deeper Dive today.
You're welcome.
We've got a lot to talk about. Let's start with Amendment 3. You came out recently in strong support for Amendment 3, which would authorize recreational marijuana in Florida. And we've spoken quite a bit in the past about how you got into the whole weed scene because of your brother, Tim. And then you said recently, I think you said you use pot every fucking day. Am I?
Every night.
Every night.
Every night I about 8:30, 9 o'clock, I have a gummy.
Do you take a whole one, or do you take part of one? Because when
I take a whole one.
Okay. Well, you build up a resistance to them, I guess.
You build up a resistance. I take a whole one. I mean, when I first started taking gummies, I was crawling up the stairs because I took too much. Mm-hmm. But now I've got it down to a science. I take the gummy, go to bed, turn off Netflix, go upstairs, and have the most sound and restful sleep you can imagine. So, as I'm going to bed, I'm kind of feeling good. And then you fall right to sleep. It's like propofol. And then that's that. Michael Jackson should have done gummies instead of propofol.
Right, yeah.
Propofol, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's why I giggled, which isn't really funny that, people die from that. But yeah. I want to talk about medical use in a moment. But first, let's talk about assuming it passes. Do you have concerns that the legislative implementation is going to take it off track? Like, could they pass THC caps or other kind of usage caps? And what guardrails do you think the legislature should put around it, and what would you put around it?
Well, I'd put around it the same type of guardrails that they put around medical marijuana. with locations and no smoking outside and the regulation. But the problem with Tallahassee is anytime they get to start working on legislation, it's really only going to benefit like 2% or less of the population. And just like with my medical marijuana, they just kept messing around with that. Scott wouldn't allow smoke. To Ron DeSantis' credit, he dropped that lawsuit, and we were able to resolve it together. That's why, like I said, I had very high hopes for Ron DeSantis when he first came in, because I asked him that day. I said, "What made you do this?" He goes, "I read the language, the intent language, and it was unambiguous." And I thought, "Wow, that's refreshing. That's what you get when you get a Harvard Yale guy who can read." And but since that time, we all have to be real that politics start to play a role in everything, including fundraising. Politicians need funds to run, so it's hard to tell what's driving the opposition to this right now. My hunch is always the pharmaceutical and liquor business. And of course, I read this morning while still in bed that DeSantis had vetoed that hemp bill.
Yeah.
And so, what he's saying is that, there's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of businesses, 100,000 workers. And, when you read it, it kind of makes sense. The only thing that doesn't make sense is there will be no guardrails for regulating what's going on in hemp, which is kind of counter to the arguments for being against Amendment 3.
Yes, that's what I've been sort of debating this with my friends, and in my head, it's a little perplexing if you want to retract, for those of us who are familiar with what's going on with the state's medical marijuana program, there have been like another 24 licenses that they accepted applications for, that they're statutorily required to issue, which would basically double the size of the medical marijuana industry in Florida. And they've been sitting on those licenses for over a year now. They accepted them over a year ago. So right. if you're contracting, or if your opposition is to expanding access to these products, or to putting a limit on the industry, it does seem it's perplexing to me why you would veto a bill. And again, I understand, like, lots of jobs, lots of revenue, families, small businesses. I do get that. But if you have a sort of an ideological or a value-based opposition to these products, then why would you want to sign off on a more loosely regulated part of the industry while you're putting the very highly regulated industry on hold? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, and I think the way you have to always look at that is you have to follow the money. I mean, the hemp industry is a big industry, that I approve of. That I'm a big fan of hemp. I have a hemp farm out in Oregon, but it doesn't mesh with, hey, we got to keep our children safe. This makes our children unsafe because it's unregulated. And the marijuana industry is very regulated. So there is a disconnect. I don't want to jump on the hemp industry because I'm in favor of the hemp industry. But it's just contradictory to veto, and I read he only vetoed 3 bills. So
Yeah, he's. I mean, usually they don't pass bills if they know that the governor's gonna veto them, right? I
right,
mean, that's the way these
right.
things work nowadays. There's not a
But
lot of
look,
tension.
this governor is, he is not a shrinking violet, and if he'll take on Disney, he'll take on anybody.
Yeah, I
And
think part of the hope is, or the belief is, that they will help to oppose the amendment, right? Because the amendment would basically expand up competition
right,
for the folks who are selling products that you can, that you're euphoria-inducing products that you could buy probably.
but I will tell you this,
Hmm.
and I've been around a long time.
Yes, we both have.
He should not hold his breath about the hemp industry coming in with money, because when it comes time to pick up a check, people get these alligator arms and they can't reach their pocket. And so I predict that there won't be that much money raised from the hemp industry because these hemp people don't really have that much money. I mean, it's not like it's it's not like it's True Leaf.
Well,
It's a whole different ball of wax.
I mean, I think that the ones who have the most money are the ones who are the manufacturers and distributors, the
Yeah,
ones who are
right,
not the
right.
ones who are selling, not the retailers. So we'll see. We'll see who
We'll
the
see who comes, and
right.
if it doesn't I mean, look, it to me, it's a no-brainer. It's more jobs. It's safer for children. I mean, right now, the black market is still very much alive in Florida and all over America. And every time one of our children buy something on the street, there is a great risk of it being laced with something that will kill them. The reason I say that is because it happens every single day. Just imagine a drug dealer in his bathroom at home making product to sell to your children, unregulated. So that will happen. And when I look at it, I'm always wondering, like, what is driving the opposition? Ron says that, he worries about stinking up the state. When I heard that, I'm like, I've never smelled marijuana ever walking around a medical marijuana dispensary. Now, I've smelled marijuana on a beach, and that's, illegal marijuana. But who smells marijuana on a regular basis unless you were at the Rolling Stones concert the other night here in Orlando?
Well, the governor.
Then you probably got high just from sitting there.
I mean, the governor has also said that there's, and I think wrongly, correct me if I'm incorrect, that there are no no time, place, location restrictions in the amendment, but the amendment does give the legislature the authority.
Well, that's a red herring, because he knows full well that the legislature will set all those parameters, just like they did with medical marijuana. And when they get through with their parameters, I bet the marijuana industry will be unhappy with those regulations.
Yeah, not near schools, not near churches,
not near schools,
near parks,
not near churches.
Yeah.
So, but that is just something that to confuse the electorate. They did the same thing with medical marijuana, and they say, well, it's gonna. But no, it's just beginning once it passes. And the hardest fight for me was after it passed, with the legislature then suing the government and Rick Scott.
Well, almost every state over the last decade, almost every state has a medical program. Let me say, many states have a medical program or adult use. And the villages is like, there's dozens of dispensaries around the villages, which is, what their demographic is. We're seeing a lot of other prominent leaders, in addition to the governor and Rick Scott, actually come out in opposition for recreational marijuana. Florida's a heavy.
Well, Rick Scott, I find, I always find Rick Scott interesting. Here's a guy who made all of his money at a hospital pumping opioids down patients' throats at astronomical prices, and then took the Fifth Amendment, for his conduct at the place. How many times did he take it? I know 150. And then he comes out and says, "I'm against." I mean, those hospitals were serving patients up with so much poison. And he says, and look, I do sympathize with people who've had family members that have gone on to have addiction problems. But Rick said that his brother, whatever the guy's name was, that he got on marijuana and it was a gateway drug to other drugs. No, the gateway drug for everyone is called beer, Boone's Farm, and MD 2020. That's when it all begins. And we all know that because we've all been there. And so this whole idea that it's a gateway drug is such a farce. Should children or teenagers be smoking marijuana? Hell no. I drug tested my kids all the time in high school. Some failed, some passed. Some got their car taken away, some didn't. But at a certain point, we're adults, and I would much rather have my employees smoking a joint the night before work than sitting on the back porch drinking a bunch of wild turkey.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Because it's night and day. I mean, if you want to ban some poison, you would ban alcohol. I mean, there's nothing worse than tequila, all of that. But I don't know. And you look around the country, these states that have legal marijuana, the world didn't end. The only thing that happened is taxes went up, jobs were created, real estate values went up, office space was rented, warehouse space was utilized. Nobody got in a fight. Nobody went to jail. Everybody went home and was happy. And to me, especially with the regulation that the legislature will place around this, there's just no good argument. I don't find one good argument. When I did the medical marijuana, it was all, our children are going to get
a joint in every backpack, I think was what.
Yeah, a joint in every backpack. Right. Guess what? It didn't happen. Why? Because I used to tell those sheriffs when I debated them, if you're worried about your kids getting in your medical marijuana, just put it with your guns that are locked up. Mm-hmm. Lock it up there. I mean, people don't have any trouble with guns in a house. And they say the reason we don't is because we lock it up. Well, lock it the fuck up. And, the same thing you do with prescription medicine. You put it up high or you lock it up. So all the arguments to me are non-arguments. They're just excuses. And they're used to, when they talk about our children, they know that's our hot button. But this hemp bill that was just vetoed, that's the real danger for our children, if there is any.
Well, the hemp products you're not allowed to buy them if you're under 21, same as right. Right. And with the marijuana products, the medical program is very, you're not
allowed to buy it unless you're 21. But guess what? Remember how you used to buy beer? You
right.
go to 7-Eleven
right.
and hand an adult, $10, and they'd go buy the beer for you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, come on.
I think it's especially if you have older brothers and sisters in the house or around.
Right.
But I think one of the things, I'm just going to push back a little.
And by the way, if you really want to buy marijuana, you can buy it at any high school in the state of Florida any day.
And I will say that I have heard from a number of parents who, because I've been in this space for many years now, who really do believe that marijuana is a gateway drug, and in their own experiences, like with Governor Scott, I'm sorry, Senator Scott, and what he says happened in his family, and in their experiences, their kids started smoking weed and then went on to other drugs.
And I believe they believe that, but I will say this. And I think for people who had family members that are addicts, and look, I got one in my own family.
I am one. I am one, and I have one. So yeah,
I have one in my family, and
I mean, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for 20 years.
I know.
So let me just make that
but it's heartbreaking, and you don't know who to blame.
Right.
The one thing that they don't.
Well, you
like
blame the mother,
blame
John.
themselves.
It's always the mother's fault, dude.
Right. They don't want to blame themselves, so
Right.
they will blame the gateway drug.
Right.
Well, maybe you should have been drug testing them.
Yeah.
When they were in the 10th grade and in the 11th grade. Maybe you should have, when you suspected it, you should have done something about it. But you got a lot of older folks. Look, Joe Biden, I have been bugging him from day one, and he just recently rescheduled, started to move to reschedule marijuana as a Schedule 1. Why was Joe Biden so reluctant? Because his family has been riddled with addiction, and Joe doesn't smoke or drink, and he thinks, hey, that's what did it to my family. And so you can't blame them, because what they believe, some of them really believe. Mm-hmm. And the heartache from addiction, again, I'm just tell you, from our nephew, it started when he, like 16, he's now 35, and it's not letting up.
I'm sorry.
And
it's soul crushing.
Terrible.
It is soul crushing. Yeah.
It's crushing.
Yeah.
And because they're so smart.
Yeah.
And, his was more the prescription drug stuff. And, but so people who've had, like Governor Scott, Rick Scott, a brother, I believe that his concerns are sincere about his brother. I just believe that these older white men do not understand that marijuana, it's not like, marijuana, LSD, heroin is all the same, like M&Ms. It's not. There's a big difference in all of them. And to me, there is less harm, far less harm with marijuana use than alcohol use.
Or opioid use, for sure.
Or opioids, or any of the narcotics that the pharmaceutical industry has made a fortune on.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think it's a partisan issue, or do you think there's fractures within the parties over this?
Well, there's fractures. Look, Matt Gaetz is the one that brokered the deal with me and Governor DeSantis. Mm-hmm. The younger Republicans are okay with it.
I mean, it's kind of been normalized for Gen Z and millennials, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, they don't have a problem with it. They mostly have used it. And guess what? The world didn't end. And guess what? They didn't have a hangover. And guess what? They got up and went to work the next day, and they were productive. I mean, productivity, you look at a country like Russia, the productivity in Russia because of vodka is terrible. But
is that right?
So,
I didn't know that.
Yes. Vodka is a big drain on the productivity of Russians. But
the last drink I ever had in my life 20 years ago was vodka.
Vodka?
Yeah.
Vodka and soda?
No, just vodka.
Oh, just vodka.
I bother with the soda. Yeah. Oh no, dude! I was a full-fledged alcoholic. Yeah, but anyway, production.
Well, we've all drank too much at certain points in our life, or not all of us, but many of us.
You don't drink anymore, do you?
Hardly a drop.
Yeah.
Hardly a drop. And I would say that, I would say that during my heyday, yeah, I had a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's videos of you that might have demonstrated that, but we won't.
Well, there's not. I mean, there's just many. I lived in union halls and dive bars after the union hall meetings. That was how I developed my practice. So I was out there throwing darts and drinking whiskey.
So just want to wrap up on pot before we move on to more politics. 60, you've run 3 amendments in Florida, 2 of them passed. Do you think Florida's a heavy lift with 60% support? Do you think that necessary for passage? Do you think you'll get over the finish line?
I think it will, because I think most people look at it and go, what are we doing? Think of the people who've had their careers, education, promotions cut short over marijuana. I said at the press conference, if I was the governor, I would free everybody. I would expunge every record. I would not make it a crime.
I heard you say that.
It's not a crime. And I would let the cops, think about these cops who put their lives on the line every day, and they're out there messing around, for marijuana arrests. To even have to take them off the street to book somebody for it's a waste of time, in my opinion. So I think it will pass. I think it will be very close. It will be in the high 50s or low 20s. It won't be, I don't think it'll be like my medical marijuana second round in the 70s, because
high 50s won't do it, dude. It needs 60.
High 50s won't do it.
Right.
No, high 50s won't do it. But what we got to remember always in politics is that 60% is a landslide.
That's true.
Not a win. It's a landslide.
That's true.
In Little League, they just have the slaughter rule. That's the end of the game. Once you get to a certain number, that's the slaughter.
Yeah.
Well, this is a landslide. So, and if it passes with over 60%, it just shows you, because another big lie is this is something that needs to be done in the legislature. Of course it does, because then we could do it right once and for all with all the regulations. But they're not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Jose Oliva, when I ran the amendment to raise the minimum wage to $15, he was like, this is something that should be done in the legislature. I said, okay, Jose, let's do it. And the whole time I was getting my signatures, I kept saying to Jose, let's do it. Guess what? He didn't do shit. Why? Because he did not want the minimum wage to be raised from $8 to $15. So when you hear him say this needs to happen in the legislature, of course it does. But it's never going to, and that's the power of the constitutional amendment.
There's another constitutional amendment on the ballot. I want to ask you about what you think the effects of these 2 amendments are. The other one would enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution. You're a devout Catholic. Where do you stand on that issue?
I'm a devout Catholic. My wife, when my wife was practicing at Ackerman Centerford, she was general counsel for Florida Right to Life. And look, I lived with her for 42 years. She is a believer in that. But the way I stand is I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe that to bring in a child, an unwanted child, is a damage to that child. in the book Freakonomics, they point out that 18 years after Roe v. Wade, crime dropped precipitously throughout America. Why? These unwanted children who were raised in, crack dens weren't there to do it. I asked my wife one time, I said, look, with abortion, what happens when the child is aborted? What happens to that child? She goes, well, I'm not. I said, well, does it go to heaven? Does the baby go to heaven? She goes, well, of course. I'm like, well, was that a bad deal? I don't know. But I think that when we start telling women what they can do with their body, especially in the case of all sorts of things, health and incest and rape, and it, to me, it just doesn't seem right. If it's a sin, then it's a sin that person will have to deal with their God at a certain time. But I would vote yes to allow a woman to have a right to choose and control their body. If my daughter got pregnant, unmarried, I would move heaven and earth for her not to have an abortion, because I believe that the psychology would be so bad to be going through life thinking about, that baby. And so on a personal level, I would never do it. But I don't like the idea of us turning into a theocracy where we have religious mullahs running the government and setting laws that are moral laws. It's interesting that they say we have abortion, but in Florida, if a fetus dies in an automobile accident, there's no wrongful death claim for that human being. And I've always asked, all the way back to Jeb, who's a friend, why not? If it's a human being, why isn't it a wrongful death? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the insurance industry does not want that to be the case. So you have unborn fetuses who are not people when they're killed in an automobile accident, but they are people when there's an abortion.
Well, they did try to pass that bill this session, and I think that part of the reason why that didn't pass this session, John, is because it happened right around the same time. I think there were concerns about the 6-week abortion ban going into effect. There were concerns about the Dobbs ruling. I don't know. I mean, there is an effort.
But it didn't pass.
No, it didn't pass.
And it's never passed.
Right.
Right. In the state of Georgia, they have the laws when there's a quickening in the womb, there is life. So at least in Georgia, they're consistent with what is life. They're not in Florida, and the reason they're not, because the insurance industry does not want to have wrongful death or brain damage case or whatever for a fetus.
So this is when I always love, and I have to brag when I say this, when my guests lead into the questions that I have prepared, because believe it or not, I actually do have some questions prepared, even though I could just shoot the shit with you for days on end. So you recently, speaking of insurance, you recently came out quite vehemently against Senator Tom Leek. I don't have the tweets up in front of me right now, but you tweeted about, and I think do you vote in Florida or do you vote in Hawaii?
I vote in Florida.
Okay.
I live in Lake Mary.
In Lake Mary. Is he your state senator?
No, he was a state senator over in Volusia. Now he's
state rep.
Moving to a new district.
Yeah. He's running for the Senate. And so you came out very strongly in opposition to him. And I'm wondering, your thoughts on that race?
My thoughts are this is, last year there was the most draconian tort reform for homeowners that you can imagine. Basically, and look, Tom Leake works for the insurance industry. When he got there to work there years ago, he didn't have any money. Today, he's got a net worth of $15 million. How? Passing legislation that's going to penalize homeowners. The new law basically says an insurance company can do anything they want to you. They can deny your claim. You're never going to get attorney's fees if you win. The only way you're going to get somebody to represent you now, this is why I don't do them anymore, is they'd have, let's say you had a roof, and the roof cost $50,000. Well, before, if the insurance company had denied you improperly, they paid the attorney's fees. Now, that's gone. Now, what happens is that $50,000 would come, and the lawyer would have to take a big piece for their fee. The homeowner cannot repair the house. And then to make matters worse, and listen, the insurance companies make money on the float. They get your premiums, they get the money, and they hold it, and they hold it, and they hold it, and they hold it, and they invest it, and that's how they make their money. Well, now, with this law that Tom Leake championed, these homeowners, it can go on for years and years and years. There is no incentive at all for the insurance industry to do the right thing and pay. It'd be better for them to hold these funds for 2 or 3 years and get the float. And if they lose, all they got to do is pay what they should have paid 3 years before. And I've said this at the time, and I'll say it again. When the next big hurricane comes through, keep this audio, because there's going to be blue tarps up and down Volusia County. They're going to be called Leakvilles because it's going to be his doing. And then after doing all this, as if homeowners didn't have enough problems, there was an amendment to freeze rates or to roll rates back. Hey, we're going to do this, but why don't we freeze rates or roll them back? He voted no. So all of this reform, but one thing didn't get reformed: the insurance companies' rates were allowed to go up with the new regulation. So I just think at this point in time, guys like him, that he should have to answer for that. You know, he thought I was somehow against his. I didn't give a shit about him. He started running. The reason I started lashing out is because he started running these ads about billboard lawyers. He called Jeff Porter at the FJA. He said John Morgan is running a campaign against me. I didn't even know who he was talking about. I haven't spent one effing dime on anything against him, and so that kind of irritated me, just to pick me out of the crowd. And so I decided, hey, if you're gonna accuse me of something I didn't do, I'm going to accuse you of something that you did do. Florida's homeowners are going to suffer because of the Tom Leake legislation that benefits the insurance company he works for.
Are you going to get involved in that race? Are you going to, or any legislative?
Yeah, I might now. I probably will now. I'll give that. I read today. The other day there's a sheriff, an old sheriff that's running, and I know him, and he's a good guy. He's a medical marijuana advocate. I met him during those days So I'll probably give him money.
Any other races you are watching? There's another trial lawyer running up here in my neck of the woods. I'm sure you know him, Daryl.
Daryl?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll help Daryl. Daryl and Ben Crump have been my friend for a long time.
I'm sure.
So.
Did Ben work with your firm for some?
We did a lot together.
Yeah.
We still do. He refers his cases. We are very good friends.
Yeah.
I plan on helping Daryl.
What do you think the big issues for trial lawyers are going to... Whatever happened to the trial lawyers anyway? They used to have so much clout in Tallahassee, and Not so much anymore.
Well, listen. When the leaders work for the insurance industry, and when the leaders are running for big positions and need campaign dollars, what happened last year will happen. And what happened is that the foxes are not only guarding the hen house, they're living in the hen house. Mm. And so, imagine giving an insurance executive a wish list of everything they would like. And if they get half, it's unbelievable. Well, they got more than half. And Tom Leake carried the water for all of it. He works for Charlie Lidecker down there in Volusia. And like I said all the time, follow the money. Look what he was worth when he first got there. Look what he's worth now. Numbers don't lie.
So what do you think the big issues are going to be for trial lawyers in the next legislative session?
Well, there's the issues always, taking away the consumer's right to the civil justice system. Who knows what it will be? I mean, it was what happened last time was unbelievable. And so all the trial lawyers are really able to do now these days is play defense. There's no playing offense.
To make things less bad, I think, is one of them.
What's less bad? Yeah. What's less bad?
Right.
At some point, the politicians have to go, well, maybe we're going too far where we're really, we're benefiting our donors, but what about these homeowners that we represent? The home is a person's number one asset. The number one bill that's paid every month in every household in Florida is the mortgage. That's the big bill. Anybody listen to this, think of another bill that's bigger than that. And now what we've done, what Tom Leake did, is he has put all of these homes at risk. When we would try those cases and win, the homeowner would cry, sob. And the reason they sobbed is they were going to get their house fixed, and that was their asset and if they didn't get it fixed, they may not have it.
Well, yeah, again. Many people, I just don't have the money out of pocket to pay for the kind of damage that we're seeing from some of these storms.
And listen, think about when they don't have to. Think about the company comes out and they deny your claim or lowball your claim, and you don't have any alternative. You can't even go get a lawyer to sue and pay the lawyer the attorney's fees if they're wrongfully withheld. It is a nightmare. And one day you will go find this tape when the blue tarps are somewhere, and they will be. This year is supposed to be a hurricane season from hell.
Yeah.
The water in the Atlantic is as hot as it is in August already. So, when it happens, it'll just be like, well, John warned us, but it'll be too little too late because people will have lost their homes.
Every time you're in front of the cameras or you do interviews with the media, and this happened at the press conference about the Amendment 3, people ask you if you're going to run for governor, or I don't even know, governor, president, senator, whatever. You're NPA. You're not registered to any party, right?
No, I'm not. I switched parties to no party.
After Andrew Gillum broke your heart? Did he break your heart?
Well, after the Democrats, they call themselves Democratic Socialist. Oh, I'm not a socialist.
You think they're too far out there on the culture war issues?
I think they're way too far out there. I think the squad is too far out there, and I think on the right they're too far out there. And what I believe and what I'm I don't know if it's me or somebody, what I am fascinated with because of my amendment success, what my amendment success taught me was that most of us agree on most things if you take the D and the R down from beside our names. So I know that when I went to the White House last year, I sat with Joe Manchin, and he was thinking of third party then. So we're all fascinated by it because we all know that the people in the middle, there's more of us than there are of them, of the far right crazies and the far left crazies. So I'm fascinated and intrigued by the thought of just saying, what do you think? What do you think if we just have somebody who's not a D, who's not an R, who's not going to be here for special interest, but's going to be here for everybody? So I'm fascinated with that thought, but when reality sets in and you get closer to it, like Larry Hogan and Joe Manchin did, you're like, I don't know if people can vote for somebody that doesn't have a D or an R next to them. It'd be like if you were a Florida State fan, voting for a neutral team. I don't know if they can do that or not. So it's interesting because I know what I believe in this country. There's really four parties. There's the far left, there's the Biden Democrats, there's the Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney Republicans, and there's the Donald Trump Republicans. Those are the four parties in America today. I would rather have like a parliamentary system where those four parties would form coalition governments. But right now it's either or. It's D or R, and and what happens with those votes is unintended consequences. Everybody that thought Roe v. Wade would never be struck down, that it didn't matter, well, it mattered. But they voted because there was an R next to that person's name. And the fact that, some real zealots came out and pushed it, now we've got Roe v. Wade, the law of the land since, 1972, is now gone. And that's what worries me about, and that's why I'm fascinated by it. Would I do it? Maybe, just as an experiment, but I wouldn't do it in a way that it wouldn't be, you would never see me knocking on doors in neighborhoods or standing in the street with a picket sign on a median. It would be more strategic, going, hey, this is what I would think. Or if it's not me, I'd love it to be somebody that, and it doesn't happen often. I mean, Jesse Ventura did. You almost kind of got to be a character.
But you are a character. I mean, size matters,
I am a character.
I mean, there you enough said right there.
Yeah, I'm a character with name ID, but that name ID cuts both ways. There's a lot of people that love me, but there's a lot of people that don't. And so I'm just going to kind of mull it over, watch what happens, keep thinking about it. But, like I said, the closer you get, the more reality sets in.
So stay tuned, right? Stay tuned.
Yeah.
That sounded a little less likely at the end.
You got to be real. You got to think of what it, that's why if I did it, I wouldn't do it in a conventional way.
Right.
I would do it. It would be, Twitter and feeds and, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what we would do. What do you think? If you like it, you like it. If you don't, hey, I'm not offended if you don't. I mean, if I didn't win, I wouldn't be crushed.
So
some people are crushed because it's been their lifelong ambition.
I mean, because you've accomplished so much, so it would,
Not so much. I've accomplished enough. I don't need, and what you got to always worry about is, are you doing it to fuel your ego, or are you doing it for purpose and passion? James Carville tried to get me to do it once, and I was like, I don't know. I said, the ego in me says yes. He goes, yeah, but you can do so much good. He goes, a governor can do so much good. And so I'd have to think about that. I mean, you go as you get older in life, you start to think about, going from success to significance, and how do you get that significance at the end? And maybe that could be a way, maybe not. I don't know.
Who do you think will be if you're not getting in? Who do you think
Well, everybody's going to get in. I think Ashley Moody, Ron DeSantis' wife,
Wilton
Matt
Simpson,
Gates, Brian Donalds, or whatever his name is, Wilton Simpson, Jimmy Petronas.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
And then, on the other side, Democrats, the guy I like is that Moskowitz guy, the congressman from down south.
Jared Moskowitz.
Who?
Jared Moskowitz.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. He's in Congress now. He was state emergency management director during COVID, so he worked with
he's smart. And
he's really smart.
He's smart, and he's not, crazy left. So he's the person that I look at and go, well, that I could do that. Or Wilton Simpson, Jimmy Petronas. I'm not that. Those are friends of mine.
Okay. So, I thought I just heard an endorsement for Jared Moskowitz. So Jared Moskowitz on the Democrat side. Are you going to make an endorsement on the Republican side now on my show?
Well, listen, Wilton and I put a bunch of money in a bank he started. I think the world of him. My law firm represented Wilton with the Republican Party in vote counts when Wilton was president.
Okay.
So I like him. I like Jimmy Petronas. Jimmy sends me pictures of my billboards when they're being blocked and obscured as he travels around the state of Florida. So Jimmy's like my own roving billboard
monitor.
If there's a branch blocking a billboard,
That's hilarious.
I know about it because Jimmy Petronas is patrolling the state of Florida.
That's hilarious.
I like them a lot. I like Matt Gaetz a lot. He's very controversial, but we've been friends. I've been friends with him and his dad for a long time.
Yeah.
And I represented him a long time ago in a dog bite matter that he had. So you just have to wait and see. I would just have to wait and see what that looks like.
I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, and we're winding down. I know you said you have another something you have to do. Go. What are your you said you're invested in hemp out in Oregon. What are your connections with the marijuana industry in Florida? I think you're invested in at least one of the state's medical marijuana operators.
I loaned money to Certera and Bo Wrigley.
Yeah.
I loaned them $10 million that I haven't been paid back. I think that company's in trouble. I got marijuana interest in Washington, D.C., and I've been working with a guy named Howard Kessler. Howard Kessler, I think, could revolutionize. He wants there to be insurance for medical marijuana. He wants to be a payer provider, and he's been working like crazy.
You mean like patient coverage for marijuana?
Yes. Instead of getting opioids, you get marijuana. And I believe that day will come. Of course, who doesn't want that? The pharmaceutical industry. Why don't they want it? It's a lethal threat to their existence. So,
this was one of the things I wanted to ask you, and then I have one final question. So this is my penultimate question.
Okay.
The reason I was asking you about your investments is because a lot of the marijuana operators around the country right now are struggling financially. The investment capital has kind of shrunk. And
most are losing money.
Right.
Listen, I said this at the time. Like all gold rushes, there's mostly fool's gold. Everybody has this, hey, I own marijuana, and I'm sitting here like a cigar store owner, and I'm having a couple of hits, and I'm selling, it looks good. But, how many pharmacies are there in Florida? There's Walgreens, CVS, and Publix. when you get into it, competition becomes fierce, and there's a winnowing out. So it's not as easy or as glamorous as it seems. Everybody likes the idea, just like they like the idea of Gold Rush, because it was new, and it seemed to be plentiful, and it was virginal, and it's like, how can we lose? Well, the way you lose is it's hard to grow, it's hard to wrap, it's hard to package, it's retail, there's theft, it's the same old story of retail. So, a lot of these people have decided, be careful what you wish for, because there's more fool's gold than real gold.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, without changes to Section 230, the Banking Act, that the banking part of it and the income tax part of it is really big part of it.
You can't even, the banks that bank it are state chartered banks, not national chartered banks.
Right. Right. But I was wondering what you think the passage of Amendment 3 will have on some of the smaller operators in the state that are struggling. Do you think it'll lift them up as well?
I think it could. I think, listen, competition lifts everybody up. It makes everybody better. That's why I say I'm not a socialistic Democrat or whatever they call themselves. I'm a capitalist with a capital C. And I think what happens to competition is old dogs get displaced by new dogs that are more, aggressive and nimble. And, when you look at America, if you look at the companies in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the Fortune 500 changed rapidly because companies fall asleep and new companies come and do great things. And there are companies right now in Florida that will emerge and be leaders, and there's companies that are leaders that will go out of business. Certera, Bo Wrigley thought that he was, he just screwed the whole thing up. He was like, well, we're $2 billion and this and that, and sat back and pontificating and lost his ass and lost everybody's money.
It's a different.
It's not an easy business. Yeah. You're talking about growing something that you have to do vertically. I mean, it's not like you can, be like if Publix had to grow all their vegetables.
Right. It's like with Bo Wrigley, like if they had to grow all the sugar for their products and
right. Yeah. Exactly. And he didn't. And he thought, because he was born with a silver spoon stuck up his ass, that it was easy. It wasn't.
Well, I know you guys are in litigation that's been dragging on for a while.
Yeah. All right, I gotta go.
One
get these
last question. One last question. Well, two. Who's gonna be the next president of the United States?
I hope Joe Biden, but it's all going to get down to Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and about 100,000 suburban women will make the decision on who's going to be president. I don't think he can win Nevada. I don't think he'll win Georgia or North Carolina. He might win Arizona. It's all going to get down to the Rust Belt, and he's got some real problems. And the elections yesterday in Europe, I mean, people across the globe they don't want immigrants. And, I don't know, when I look at it, they say like 62% of America, I read this poll, are in favor of rounding up immigrants and sending them back to their country. Well, look, the way as I get older and I think about it, I look at these people that they're fleeing with their children. They're on rafts going through, dangerous waters to find a safe place for their family. I don't believe God sees borders, and I don't want to see borders, but 62% of Americans said they'd ship them back. Look, the truth of the matter is, if we wanted to get rid of all illegal immigrants, we could do it in one day. We could make it a felony to hire one and a $100,000 fine, and that would be the end of it. But the reason we don't is because we like the idea of almost slave labor. There's 14 million of these people. When you see somebody in a strawberry field or swinging off of a rope on a building with a squeegee in their hand, that's an illegal immigrant. They do all the jobs that we won't do. But so it's going to be very tough, very tight, and it's going to get down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
One fun question. Thank you very much. That was a very thoughtful answer. Thank you again for being so generous with your time. One fun question. You've accomplished a lot. You billboards, bus wraps, theme parks, the largest law firm in the country, I believe.
Yeah.
And what's on your bucket list?
My bucket list? I have a third book I'm writing right now. I've written 2 books. One's called You Can't Teach Hungry. One's called You Can't Teach Vision. So I'm halfway through my third one, so that's on my bucket list. But my bucket list now is more, like I said at the beginning, is focusing on significance more than success. You know, I've made more money than I ever dreamt, and I don't really understand how it fully happened. I think most, when I look back on it, it's a lot of luck and a lot of left turns instead of right turns. So I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but luckily I'm in a position where I can't spend my interest. So that part's over for me. My wife is hell-bent on her foundation, and our kids have done well enough that what we hope that we can do is to take all of the money that we've made, that our kids will have had enough by the time we die, and that there's a foundation that we've already set up and that we've already been funding, but the whole thing will be funded, which would go to things like shelter, food, water, medicine, clothing, basically dignity. Something, anything that helps a person have dignity. That's what I would like to take the riches from my life to pay back for this incredible luck that I had in my life. And so that's my bucket list, to start moving from success to significance. I did it with, I started that journey with marijuana and the minimum wage. And, I'm looking around. You don't know when God's going to whisper. I went to a retreat one time and called Crescio, and in Crescio they told us that, you can't solve the problems of the world, but you can bloom where you're planted. Something can come across your desk that you can do. You can go pick up somebody. You can talk to somebody. Just somebody's lonely. You can volunteer. But I call them God whispers, and sometimes I'll hear somebody will say something to me. Like the other day, I was on Facebook and I saw this little girl that was friends with my daughter, and she's got breast cancer, and they had a GoFundMe page for her. I'm like, wow, she's 36 years old. And so God whispered, and I went to the GoFundMe page and, did my bit that day. So I'm just walking through life, waiting for the whisper and being brave enough and bold enough to answer the whisper. That's the way I'm going to finish this journey.
Well, Pot Daddy, that was the perfect question to end our conversation on. I know next time you're in town, I owe you something, and you
owe me a spaghetti dinner.
I owe you a spaghetti dinner, and I have not forgotten, and you have not forgotten.
I've not forgotten.
All right. Well, we're going to do that next time. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
It's been a pleasure.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.